2, 1, 2.
I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't hold yourself in regret, just love yourself and you're set. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way.
Hey! Welcome to Grace Point. Come on, let's stand with us. Dance around, sing with us. Here we go. My mama told me when I was young, we are all born superstars, yeah. She rolled her hair and put her lipstick on in the glass of her boudoir. There's nothing wrong with loving who you are, 'cause you were made perfect, babe. All of you were too. So hold your head up high, you'll go far. Listen to me when I say, come on, sing it. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't hold yourself in regret, just love yourself and you're set. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Yeah! Give yourself prudence and love your friends. All you kids rejoice you're true. In the religion of the insecure, I must be myself, respect my youth. A different lover, yeah, it's not a sin. Believe capital H-I-M. Hey, hey, hey. I love my life, I love this record. Mi amorevole feia. No matter gay, straight or bi, lesbian, transgender life, I'm on the right track, baby, you were born to survive. No matter black, white or beige, Asian or Latinx made, you're on the right track, baby, you were born to be brave. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, you were born this way. Baby, you were born this way. Ooh, there ain't no other way, baby, you were born this way. Right track, baby, you were All right, here we go.
Oh, I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I'm on the right track, baby. I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I'm on the right track, baby.
One more time.
Oh, I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I'm on the right track, baby. I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I'm on the right track, baby.
Last time, here we go.
Oh, I was born this way, hey. I was born this way, hey. I'm on the right track, baby. I was born this way. Hey.
All right. I love it. I love it. That's good. Grace Point, we are so glad that you're with us today. Welcome. You are here. You're safe. You're celebrated. We're going to sing another song. Here at Grace Point, what we love to do is we love to reimagine, reclaim things from our faith, maybe that we grew up with. And this is a song about the goodness of God. Maybe not the God concept and the image of God that we were given, but actual God, the divine in us, the divine in you. That is good. That's why we're here. That's why we celebrate. So we'd love for you to sing that song with us this morning.
I will sing of your goodness. I will sing of your love. Though the seasons come quickly, you have always been enough. And though the night may get darker, and though the waiting seems long, you have always been faithful to changes. Oh, what a friend of mine. So I remind my soul to bless you, standing firm upon this truth, knowing you cannot be shaken, 'cause I've seen what you can do. Yeah, you are good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good. In the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me, good for me.
Sing you are
Are good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good. In the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me. You keep on getting better. 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 Sing it out. You keep on getting better. You keep on getting better. Yeah, yeah. You keep on getting better.
You keep on getting better.
Come on, let's sing that. You keep on.
Keep on getting better. You keep on getting better.
Oh, yes, you do.
You keep on getting better. 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 Ah, good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good. And in the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me.
You sing it.
You are good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good, yeah. In the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me.
Wow, yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. What we'd love for you to do now is to maybe meet somebody you have never met before. I know this is the introvert's nightmare. Sorry about that. But we could like to call this the meet and greet. Have a conversation, build community. We'll be back in a couple minutes. We love you.
Good morning. Hello. Hello, my name is Emily Wire, and I am the Director of Operations and Communications, and thank you. And I'm also the host of our Young Adult Meetup, which is meeting this Thursday on that side of the wall, so you should come at 6:30. What? There is a restaurant over there. We're not just like meeting outside. Okay, the QR code that's on your screen and that's on the chairs right now, that's going to give you a link tree of everything that's important, everything that we've got going on. If you're new, then you should tap the Connect card button, and that's going to be how you get plugged in, how you sign up for the newsletter, which has our weekly announcements. The only thing that I have for you is that we are participating in Nashville Pride in 2 weekends. So I just want to remind everyone, don't forget to sign up for the parade if you want to walk with us. Anyone is welcome to do so. And then also volunteer for our booth. We have 6 people per time slot. And we really especially need some people for the last 2 slots of each day. So the last 2 slots of Saturday, last 2 slots of Sunday. And then just don't forget to order your GP shirt in time for Pride. And now to Tiffany for information on Project Transformation.
Woo! Hey, I'm Tiffany, she, they. I'm our director of our kids and our students, and I help with our college ministry. Yay! Yeah, that energy it's okay. So this is for the people in the room, and if you are online, there'll be information for you in just a second. If you are physically in Nashville, we are volunteering with an organization that I also work with called Project Transformation. Their job is to interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline through literacy intervention. And if you're in Tennessee, we just had 60% of third graders fail their test. I'm a little worked up about it, which means that's a lot of kids who are struggling with literacy things. And what they really need is they need adults to sit with them, to listen to them read. And so during their summer, they actually gain their reading scores back, and they can be confident in it, and it gives them space to just sit with an adult. And here's the best part about it. You don't have to teach them anything. You literally sit down. They read you a book that someone has already decided is on their reading level, and you help them if they need help with words. It's really cool. It's really sweet. We'll be at Woodbine United Methodist, which is in Woodbine community. It's a predominantly Latino community, and those kids are some of the most amazing kids ever. So if you're interested in sitting with kids, having them read a book, and probably receiving some high fives and hugs, then you should sign up with Kathy in the very back. She's got to sign up. It's the week of Pride. Woo! Sign up with Kathy. And it's in the mornings. And so if you cannot volunteer every day, which is Monday through Thursday, but you can go on Tuesday, cool, just sign up. If you have a student or a kid, you can bring them with you. As long as they are 13 years and older, they can go by themselves if they want to volunteer. But if you have an adult, you can bring your kids with you. So if you have any questions, let us know about that. If you are online, there are places all over Tennessee, and if you want to get involved, reach out to me. There's probably one in your community, and we will get you connected to volunteer locally, also with the same organization. That's a lot. You're amazing. Goodbye.
Grace Point's goal is to create a safe and affirming community for all of you. We have some exciting opportunities that are going to be coming up in the fall, which is going to be here before we know it. You can give in multiple ways. You can text 84321, any dollar amount. You can go to gracepoint.net/give. You can scan the QR code, or you can Venmo us at GracePointTN. And just remember that we're Grace Point with an E. Thanks.
If you have a small one, which is like a child, you can bring them to the front in the middle. If you are over third grade, you do not have to come down here. If you need to bring your child because they're nervous or anxious, you can come with them. If you are online and you got a child with you, this is the time that we're going to do our children's moment. It's okay. You want to sit there? Last time we lost a tooth, y'all. So that's okay. Jackson, are you going to keep all your teeth in your mouth? Yeah. No more loose teeth. Mila, you want to sit right here? I'm not going to make you talk. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, friends. Can y'all say good morning? Some of us, yeah. Whew. We are kind of shy today, aren't we? Yeah. It's like day one all over again. One, how many of you are really happy that it's summer? Oh, several people are very happy it's summer. Okay. How many of you are really tired because it's summer and you've been doing a lot of things? A few of you. How many of you are just really tired because it's before noon? Yeah. Okay. Well, today we're going to talk some more about creation myths. So last week we talked about how maybe God created the whole world in this story that we have about God putting things together and creating the animals and the plants and all that. Were any of you here last week and remember that? Yeah, we drew some pictures and we did some things. Today we're going to talk about how God maybe created people. Okay, so I want you to look around. We got a whole bunch of people in this room. Okay? Do you see anyone in this room that looks just like you? There's some people that might look very similar, yeah, as you all look to your parents. That's right. That's how genetics work. For those of you who are biological children, adopted children, as me, guess what? We don't look like our parents, but they're still our parents. So today we're going to talk about how God made people. Now, I have a big question for you. Why do you think God made people? You can raise your hand if you have an answer. Why do you think God made people? Jude, do you have an answer? Jude mouthed no, that he doesn't have an answer. Okay. Annabeth, do you have an answer? Why do you think God made people? Annabeth is not going to talk into a mic today. We have no answer. So guess what? That's the end of the lesson. We have no clue. Eva, do you have it? What? Will you say it into the mic?
To have love.
To have love. God made people to have love, right? I think God made people so that when God is not like physically with us all the time, that we can remind each other that we are loving and we can love each other, and that we can remember that even when we're not feeling really great, like a lot of us are today, that we are still really loved. Can you remember that? Cool. All of our volunteers are going to go to the door. Are y'all ready for our lesson today? Sweet. We're going to go color, and we're going to build some stuff, and we're going to have snacks. So if you'll stand up, and you'll go to the door over there, okay? And if you are 3rd, 4th grade up, you can go to the door also. We're going to go back.
Bye, kids. Let's all stand again. We've got another song in this quest that we have to kind of reclaim, reimagine hymns. There's a hymn that I've rewritten the lyrics to over the past week, and I kind of grew up in a religious context that said, there was literally a song I used to sing that says, the only thing that's good in me is Jesus. You know, the concept that our hearts, our minds, who we are as humans aren't really trustworthy. That's kind of what I believed about myself, and I no longer believe that. I think that we are, as humans, trustworthy. We can trust our hearts. We can trust our feelings. We can trust our minds. We should use them. And so this song, Be Thou My Vision, I've kind of rewritten a little bit to be able to say, we can be, our eyes can be our vision. The people around us can help us be our vision. Our hearts can be our vision. So I'd love for y'all to sing that with us today. Thou my vision, O light of my eyes, guide me through darkness and renew my sight. last verse. Be thou my vision, O love in my heart. Lead me with kindness and never depart. Teach me to walk in compassion and grace. Reveal the glory of God in each face. And we are all connected. Yes, we are the same. Reveal the glory of God in each face. Reveal the glory of God in each face. Amen. Amen. That was beautiful. You can be seated. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you leave the fan? I'm a little hot. Everybody, Ricky Brady, can we show some love and appreciation? My goodness. When we talk about reimagining faith, it's not just reimagining the interpretation of Scripture or reimagining our theological categories. It's also reimagining our tradition, reimagining our music, reimagining, and he's doing that so beautifully for our community, and we're so grateful. Hi, everybody. My name's Josh, and I'm home, and it is so good to be home. I have missed y'all. I've had a lot of fun. It's been great being with other like-minded, beautiful communities, but to quote one great theologian, there's no place like home, and so it's good to be here, and I'll be here the rest of the month, which is also exciting, so that's great. It's also, oh, thank you. I thought, oh no, I'm being yelled at. It's finally happening. Happy Pride, by the way. It is Pride. Oh, I love Pride at Grace Point. And before I introduce my friend who's going to be here for a conversation today, just wanted to let you know of two things that are happening coming up on July 9th. Both things are happening on the same day. One is we're starting a brand new series. Our next series will begin then, and it's called Rhythm, Spiritual Practices for Progressive Christians. So one of the things that many of us were taught in our previous religious experience was there are these things you do that help you on the path of transformation, right? You want to become, and maybe the language that was used, you want to be a better Christian? Do these things. And for those of us who've gone through, and you could call it, for some of us it's a deconstruction. For some of us it's just sort of an evolution. We haven't deconstructed, maybe we didn't have anything to deconstruct. We've just been on a journey. Whatever that looks like for you, maybe you're in a spot where you're wondering, what does it look like to engage spiritual practices in this particular deconstructed, unraveling, evolving, like what might that look like? Because some of those practices that were go-tos, we may now have a weird relationship with. Like, you don't have to give me a show of hands, but like prayer, what is going on? Right? Like there's sort of this, what do we do with prayer now if we no longer believe that there's this being in the sky who just, when we ask the right thing and get the words right and get enough people on board, this being pops in, bippity boppity boos it, and then goes back, right? Like how do we talk about those things? And so we're going to explore some things that are pretty familiar, and we're going to reimagine them. But then we're going to talk about some things that I bet has never been talked about, or bet you've never been taught it's a spiritual practice. For example, and Ricky alluded to this, experience. How many of you have any experience at all ever in your life? Okay, much of the time. What if instead of being taught to be skeptical of our experience, we were taught to see the experiences we have in the world as being a doorway into our own journey of transformation? that they matter, that they should be taken with care and understood. Like, what if we begin there? Not with, hey, we're going to start with teaching you how to pray every day, 7 times a day for 8 hours a day. Like, what if we just start with, are you an existing being in the world? Let's begin there. And so that's where we're going to begin on July 9th. Second, on that day, we're also going to celebrate baptism as a community. Baptism at Grace Point is a little different. We're not baptizing you because you're a problem for God that needs to be solved. We're not baptizing you so that you can finally have that relationship with God you've always wanted. We're celebrating that those things are already true for you. You have that relationship with God. You have never been a problem with God. You are exactly who God made you to be, and you belong. And so we'll be celebrating belonging on that Sunday through this ritual of baptism. If you want to be a part of that, let us know. There's a link, I think an email in the newsletter, that if you haven't signed up for that, you should sign up for it so you can get it this week. But if you have questions, email that news link or just see me after the gathering's over. I would love to respond to your questions and we can set up a time to chat. But if you're interested, if you're thinking like, this seems like maybe I'm at a new beginning point, maybe I'm at a spot where my faith that I inherited fell apart and I'm no longer there, but I'm beginning something new. Or maybe you've never experienced baptism and you're like, let's do it. Whatever that looks like. And if there's nobody who wants to do it, we're not gonna be like, we failed Jesus to, like, not that deal. This is not a pressure thing. We wanna make it available for people in our community for whom these rituals still hold meaning. And last year we had a baptism gathering and it was just absolutely beautiful. And so if you're interested, let us know. And with that, I'm going to introduce in just a second my friend Heather Hamilton, who's here. But first, I want to read to you, our founding pastor, Stan Mitchell, wrote, and I could not find the word at 9 o'clock. The word is endorsement. That's not a 9 o'clock word. Are you with me? That's an 11 a.m. word. And so Stan wrote an endorsement for her book, Returning to Eden. So I'm going to read Stan's endorsement. I'll give you her bio, and then I'll welcome Heather up. Here's what Stan wrote. For me personally, never have the words sacred, inspired, and infallible felt more appropriate for describing the Bible than they did as I was reading this book. All of the arguments about literalness and historicity notwithstanding, Heather Hamilton transcends the fray, inviting us to take the Bible more seriously than most of us ever imagined possible. So regardless of your relationship with the world's longtime best-selling book, whether that relationship is warm, strained, or estranged, this book will be a gift in your life. I mean it when I say, get ready to have your mind stretched and your heart healed. So don't make a line now, but after the gathering, you can go line up and get her book. Heather Hamilton received her BA in journalism from Georgia State University and spent many years doing video production before discovering her love of writing. After filming and editing stories with people from all over the world, celebrities, orphans, religious leaders, royal family members, political figures, and everyday people, Heather recognized the common threads and themes intertwining all humans across religions, cultures, classes, and demographics. She is passionate about fostering human connection through storytelling, writing, art, and exchanging ideas. She lives in Atlanta with her husband and 3 children. Would you give your best Grace Point welcome to Heather Hamilton?
Thank you guys so much.
Heather, thanks so much for being here. Heather was in town for a conference she spoke at yesterday. And we figured, like, if friends are in town, they should stop by Grace Point, right? Like, of course, they should stop by Grace Point. And we got into this a little before the 9 o'clock, but we didn't get into it at the 9 o'clock. So I'll throw you a curveball right off the bat.
Okay, yes.
We're talking about the process of, like, you write the book, and then you're like, oh, it's done. And then you're like, no, you likened it to having a newborn, right? Like, you go through the process, but then it's waking you up at 3 a.m., demanding to be fed.
Yeah, and then they hand you the baby back. And it's like, feed this,
home.
make it walk, and goes in the world and thrive. So no one tells you how tired you're going to be after you release a book.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for you, I would imagine that you're also hearing from so many people who are finding this, and it's giving them a new lease on their spirituality, which has to be really kind of a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I love human connection. So when I know probably for a lot of us, at least, like, I didn't want to be in this deconstruction space. It wasn't like the story that I was picking out. So in some way, I feel like I have the one story with everyone who's here. There's like a resonance. But for me, it felt very lonely. I felt very alone at first. And so you kind of decide, I'm going to do this alone, and you have that conviction, which I think is necessary. But then when you are out in the field wandering around and you see a face that sees you, it's like a beautiful thing. So that's what I've experienced. Yeah.
When I was 20 years ago as a pastor and I was deconstructing, I would meet other pastors and try to decide if they were safe. And so we'd be at lunch and I'd be like, schmob schmel? Like if you say close enough to the name and they're like, oh, you mean Rob Bell? And they like don't chase you out, you're like, you're good?
Yes.
And you're exactly right. That sense of alienation, of feeling like I am the only person in the world who's probably wrestling with this. And then you lock eyes with somebody who also shares that experience. And then you find out there's a lot of somebodies. And the evangelical church is creating more of them by the day that are having this wake-up moment of, gosh, maybe the thing that I inherited, that I experienced, and maybe the thing that has harmed me maybe that's not all there is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you wrote about it. I'm so glad you're here to talk about it.
Yeah.
As we jump in, can you just sort of talk about your experience of sort of having your faith jolted is what gave birth to this project. So could you talk a little bit about that story, the experience that led you to write about this?
Yeah. So, Josh mentioned that you've been deconstructing for a very long time, and I've been in this space for probably about 5 years, but I didn't come to it through any kind of rational, no one poked a hole in my theology. It was there was a very tall, thick wall around my theology. And so anything that contradicted it, the drawbridge was not coming down for that, the drawbridge was up. And so, there wasn't a lot of conscious cognitive dissonance for me with my kind of fundamentalist evangelical theology. And so I grew up in the church. I got saved when I was 7.
I want to point out that I also do that when I say saved. Does anybody else? I got saved, and you kind of know there's it's a thing.
Yeah, because fast forward to about 5 years ago, the real salvation experience was a giant train wreck. It was not a great sales pitch, But at 7 years old, I was presented with probably the same gospel that most of us were, and it was a sincere yes to Jesus and a recognition of this love and divine essence in this person, and then a ceding of all my agency and my autonomy to just this constant life or death hypervigilance of, oh, my playground friends are going to hell. I can't just go play kickball. I need to tell you the good news, So I was the annoying evangelical girl, on the playground, witnessing to all my friends, slipping gospel tracts in my lockers in high school. Anyway, and eventually finding myself in a large, influential megachurch where I met my husband, and we had our 3 kids, and he eventually became the music director at this church. And it kind of just felt like we took this narrow path, and that's how we gained our influence, and now our goal in life was to make church as cool and relevant as possible, to get as many people in the door, so that the pastor could get them saved. And so that was the trajectory of my life and the filter through which I made all my decisions. And then about 5 years ago, shortly after the birth of our 3rd child, I had, it almost felt like a divine intervention, but where I had just some really painful revelations about my own life. Trauma that I didn't know what trauma was, didn't realize that I had experienced it, and that it had largely guided the trajectory of my life. And so it was the first time you get glasses, putting them on and realizing I've been blind my whole life, and suddenly, nothing on the outside has changed except for my perception. So I had a really crystal clear perception of myself, and it triggered a complete identity crisis, and what could conventionally be called a nervous breakdown. It was an active PTSD mental health crisis, which I had no context or box for. And so I quickly just descended into, a nervous breakdown where it was just persistent panic attacks. I had already been in therapy, talk therapy, for like 15 years. And so to my knowledge, there was no other resources for me other than, if I ask for help at this point, I'm going to a psychiatric facility, and I had just had a baby. And so this felt like an impossible situation where I was terrified of being separated from my child. And so it was resisting help until one night about 1 a.m., I had kept my husband up all week with these episodes, and so I'm like, I'm just gonna go down to the basement and try to ride this out by myself, and I'm calling out to God like I had never before in my life. And I just had this moment of knowing that there was no one on the other end of the phone line. Like it was this feeling of just being tethered out in space. And whoever or whatever, I call it my God concept, wasn't real. It just died in that moment. It was a very, like, why have you forsaken me kind of moment where I knew that whatever I had imagined might happen in that moment wasn't real. And I also understood that I was in hell. Like, I understood that the concept I have had of hell wasn't correct, and what I was experiencing right now was it. And at this point, I knew that my life was in danger. Like, it was just total psychological overwhelm. So I came up, I told my husband, I think we need to call 911, which for me was just committing my spirit to the hands of fate. I thought that, that I was going to be taken away. And when we opened the door, I immediately recognized the EMS responder as a transgender woman. And being in that evangelical context, I had this orientation about myself as the one who held the truth, and it was my job to bestow the truth to people who were lost or didn't have it. And so there was this lack of trust that I could receive help from someone that I didn't trust in this moment of vulnerability. But I just started articulating my story, and immediately when this woman started speaking to me, it was like a moment of, like the woman at the well, where Jesus saw me, and whatever I had thought Jesus was, or heard about Jesus, or been seeking my whole life, I just saw the truth right in front of me. And I later came to call this like a mystical experience, but it was like time just completely collapsed. There was no time. It was just Christ in her transmitting this loving energy to me. There was Christ in me, and it was, this moment of what I would call eternity, which I understood was not this everlasting moment of time, but it was like deeper than time, if that makes sense. So anyways, I'm like suspended in this bubble with Jesus on my front porch, and from that place, it was like, okay, I need a lot of trauma therapy, so that was like the next step, but this was like the catalyst for me going like, my worldview doesn't match reality, and so the theological constructs had to come down.
Yeah, so it was, which is one of those interesting things that actually lines up with so much of the experience and so much of Scripture where Jesus shows up in front of people in ways they did not expect, through people they did not expect. And you have this experience of Jesus that, and what's interesting too is when people talk about, when critics of deconstruction talk about it, they have all these sort of like, well, you just deconstructed because it's cool, said the person who's never deconstructed, and that you're just doing it, right? Like and this is sort of, it sort of reminds me of that sort of Paul on the road to Damascus, right?
That's
just
exactly what it was.
Knocked off the horse there.
Yes. Yeah. By recognizing, I think I'm serving God, and in doing that, I'm harming God. Like that is how I saw it, and so it was like an immediate brick wall where I saw, the error of my ways, and in that it was like my whole life as I knew it kind of fell apart. So that's why that's funny. Like, why would anyone choose that? Like, yeah, I would love to like nuke my family and my religion and all my income. It sounds sexy. Yeah.
Come to Jesus. It will ruin your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like maybe don't come,
So when you start talking about the idea of Christ that has sort of developed for you, this sounds very, along the lines of Richard Rohr, Universal Christ.
Yeah.
And so could you just talk a little bit, you talk about a Christian mystic, and you have that great quote from Karl Rahner who basically says the future of Christianity are mystics.
Yeah.
You say the Christian mystic is one who's made the leap from loving Jesus to loving everything because they see Jesus in everyone and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You got groans on that one, good groans on that one.
Yeah.
It's so good. Could you just talk a little bit about what does that mean for you, and how has your image and understanding of Christ changed and changed how you show up in the world?
Yeah. So it started out with some grace for myself in a recognition of what I think is actually like a necessary and inevitable psychological pattern for humans, which is first to come into this world as children in this state of like unitive consciousness. We're just one with our experience, like an infant is quite literally just one with its source, like the picture that we see in the garden of everything kind of just being one with the source, one with the tree of life. And then once our brains start to develop, we see, Eve eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And to me, that is a symbol of the rational mind, the dualistic mind coming online. We start to label and divide. And that very mechanical brain loses awareness of its essence. So we see in the story, it says Adam fell asleep. And it never says that he woke up. Like, it never says it. And so I began to see this pattern where I recognized Christ within this woman, but I also recognized this awakening in me that felt like this spiritual amnesia, like I had woken up from some kind of dream, and I had realized that this essence, which my language for that was Christ, had been with me since the beginning. Since before I was born, I discovered this face I had before I was born, before any labels were attached to me or identified with anything. But then we project this inner divinity onto a deity, and that was on Jesus. And so that love that I had for Jesus was pure. The mistaken perception I made is that it was on something outside of me that had to be like received into myself for me to have it. And so all like my pure love and devotion was like directed at this deity. So in this experience of basically my God concept dying, I talk in the book about how it's like our God concept sacrifices itself for man, and man sacrifices himself for God, and there's like this crucifixion called Christ where they come together, like the two become one flesh. And so this spirit or essence of Christ that I had, ejected out of myself came like crashing back in. So I understood it was like Christ is in this woman, this is an expression of God, Christ is in me, I'm an expression of God. And then the inevitable conclusion of that was like, that's true for everybody and all of creation. So what I had previously identified as like a vertical spirituality became like a horizontal spirituality, and that is, the cross is a very grounding symbol of that truth for me.
I just think when it comes to Jesus, I think if we were to bring Jesus up here and give him a mic, he'd probably be pretty impressed with the technology. But I also think if we were to say, let us fill you in the last 2,000 years, the idea that billions of people worship him and spend all this money building these buildings that house the worship of him, I think he would be a little embarrassed, but definitely frustrated. Because what it has done then, it has taken everything and focused it on this one person. Instead of the thing this one person seemed to be alluding to, which is this, like everybody gets to do this. Everybody gets to be this. It's, it's in John, it's you've seen the stuff I've done, you're going to do even better stuff. The relationship I have with God, you have with God. And it seems like in John especially, Jesus is trying to wake people up to the thing that's already true. And this idea of learning to see Christ in everybody and everything, do you feel like it is, I mean, because when I think about, and the couple of times when I would have anything close to an experience, what I would call a mystical experience, just the overwhelming sense of like being plugged into a sense of love that is almost too much for the operating system to process. Has that been an experience for you?
Yes. Well, I mean, in the story of the garden, it kind of ends with this, and then God put this angel with the flaming sword to guard the garden so that, Adam could not return to it. And so to me, Adam is representative of that masculine mind that wants to order and give name to everything and categorize. And so in order to come back into this state of unitive consciousness or seeing Christ in everything, it's like you have to go through fire. And it is a hellish, terrifying experience. Yeah. And so that was my experience. What was the exact question? I can't remember.
I don't remember. I just made it up on the spot.
Yeah. God, I can't remember what you said.
Well, just this sense of like.
Oh, following.
Well,
yes.
Having this overwhelming sense, like when you begin to see Christ in other people.
Yes.
There's an overwhelming sense of love that comes, even sometimes in rare moments for enemies.
Yeah.
And I say rare moments because most of the time, if people are my enemies, I don't
I want to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just that sense of, oh my gosh, we really are all connected. If the plane goes down, we're all on it.
Yeah.
And I think I love these people.
Yes. There's a quote in the book by a Catholic mystic named Carol Houselander, and she had a mystical experience where she, for 2 days, saw the face of Christ in every person that she passed by. And at the end of the 2 days, it slowly closed, but she came to the same conclusion that everybody was Jesus in disguise, as Mother Teresa says. And she says, reverence must be paid even for the sinner because Christ in the tomb is still Christ. Mm-hmm. And so it's this recognition that in our the most innate part of us is this seed, like this germinating potential, which is the divine spark of God. But then also a recognition that in the human experience, we experience this trauma, and depending on our temperaments and our environments, it's, we're going to fall asleep or forget the essence of who we are, and sometimes the image of God looks psychologically disfigured and causes a lot of harm. But in my experience, it wasn't anybody telling me how it was. It was this woman who saw that in me and mirrored it back to me. And as soon as I had the correct mirroring through this woman, which was pure love, I immediately knew the truth about myself. No one had to explain it to me. It was a complete reorientation. And so, when Jesus says, follow me, pick up your cross and follow me, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, get up from the foot of the cross and turn around and get on the cross. And it's this psychological crucifixion of everything that you have thought that you were, this concept of yourself, kind of falling off. We talk about rebirth. It's like this re-entry into the womb where we're like stripped of all of our identities, discovering that face or our essence before we were born so that we can like be rebirthed and re-enter our worlds as our authentic selves, which is, this outward flow of God. And so by doing that, we like quite literally regenerate the world.
Yeah. When you were talking, it reminds me of the story of the prodigal son in Luke, where the text says he came to his senses. And it wasn't just that he went home. Mm-hmm. It was like he came to his senses at one point, and he's like, this is not who I am. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is not the... And then it's like that awareness leads to the journey back to himself and back to what was always true of him.
Yeah, and what I love about that story, I have a chapter on it, is he goes full circle, and then we end up seeing the prodigal and we see the other brother. And they're in the same place with the father, but the prodigal's in heaven and the other brother's in hell. They're in the same place. It's just a different perception of reality. And it was actually the prodigal, by taking the whole journey and, going through all of it, landing in the same place, that he was able to arrive at that conclusion, in the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is spread out upon the earth and men don't see it. He has to take the whole journey. And it's like, you were already here, but we have to take the journey in order to see it. So it's interesting that the other brother was there too, but his perception of the whole situation was hellish.
Yeah. I love the Gospel of Thomas Deepcut.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Just throw that out there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think if we're being honest, and this is true of both the Hebrew Scripture and the New Testament, that sometimes we read these stories about God, and sometimes God seems to be the bad guy, if we're just being honest. I mean, a flood that wipes is a genocide that wipes out, a willingness to kill here, a willingness to kill thousands of people there. And we sort of, in Christianity, have created this thing where, well, the Hebrew Scripture God was cranky, and then Jesus made this God nice. But tell that to Ananias and Sapphira, who get killed for not giving enough to the church offering, right? Like, that's in there. And it's almost like there's this, God, the understanding of God changes over the Bible. And it doesn't just change linear. It moves forward, and then sometimes somebody comes along and tries to move it backward. We sort of landed in the similar place in our books on this, which is, I think that when we see the word God in the Bible, how many of you have had somebody tell you something in the Bible and they say, well, God said? Yeah, well, God said. And what I've come to realize is actually no, a character named God in the Bible said. Now, I'm not making a big declarative statement, there is no God. What I'm saying is that what we have in the Bible is an author's experience, journey, perception of what God and who God is. Which is why if you lay all of Scripture out, it doesn't all match. Because you have different people at different times saying, there are people who are saying God wants us to be peaceful and turn our swords into plowshares. That's in Isaiah. In Joel says, take your plowshares and beat them into swords, which had to just be exhausting because they just got done beating them into plowshares. And it's like, could you not have gotten your mind made up sooner? And there's just sort of there's this back and forth about this God seems severe and angry and jealous. This God seems wonderful and compassionate and full of love for God's creatures. You say this in your book. It is not God who changes throughout the text. It is the human understanding of God that has shifted. Why in the world? Why is it so important that we see that?
Yeah. There's a pastor named Brian Zahn who has this wonderful quote, and he says, God is like Jesus. God has always been like Jesus. We haven't always known this, but now we do. And so, when I experienced Jesus in the flesh on my front porch through this human, I realized that it wasn't God who had changed, it was my perception. And I started to see this throughout the text, how in the beginning of the Bible, we have this, it's like we have Jesus and then we have Jesus' angry dad over here. And throughout the text, Jesus' angry dad gets like a little nicer as we go. But then Jesus' whole shtick is like, you've heard it said, but I say. Like, you heard Jesus was like this, you've read the text like this, and I'm here to tell you something different. And so much like, I was fascinated with your book, just that we kind of came to this same revelation of the God character. Often, it's like the human in the story is training the God character to be a little nicer. So, you talked about this story, and so did I, but like Abraham and Isaac, and seeing which character in this story looks most like Christ to me. And I was like, I see it in Isaac. It's like, and you pointed out, this person who's being like basically complicit in his own crucifixion, but just refuses to respond in any kind of violent or retributive way. So it's like, oh, I see Christ there. In the Noah's story, is God the one like committing genocide to like satisfy his wrath? Or is it more like Noah who builds this ark of safety, like when the world is falling apart? So I found in my own experience that God was revealed through humans. That was consistent with what was being revealed through Jesus, who was a human, and then through all these different characters. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult for us if we've been told that, to question God or like profane the holy book. It's a really radical idea to say like the God character might not actually be a reflection, but it's actually what we see and what Jesus reveals is like your God concept, which is inevitable, so there's like grace for it, but it's a concept, and there has to be like this experience of life, in life, of with Christ, where that dies, and we see the God concept like embodied in our own flesh.
Reminds me of the other story in Genesis where Abraham is talking to God, and God reveals that he's going to kill a bunch of people because the God character is he in the Genesis story. And Abraham says to God, will the creator of everything not do right? What?
Yeah.
Like, if you're paying attention, Abraham just said, like, God, you're kind of being a bad guy. Why don't you do the right thing? And they end up getting this negotiation about how many good people it would take in a city to not destroy it. And it's just this, it's almost like within the text, you see people wrestling with their concept and image of God. And I think that's throughout the entirety of Scripture. People are wrestling. And I think that's, there's progress made, and then you have other authors who come along and say, actually, we think God is a little more like this, and he doesn't like us so much. And then this happens. And this happens all throughout society, too. I mean, when I think about over the past 10 years, there were lots of reasons, half a decade or more ago, to be really encouraged about where we are on the issue of LGBTQ plus inclusion. Maybe we've got a lot of progress need to be made in the church, of course, but in society, it seemed like we were moving in a direction, and now there's a force pushing back on it, a force that is angry and hateful and is pushing back on it. And just like I believe those forces within the Scripture or within the tradition that say, this is God and God is angry, even when they rear their heads and push back on this image of God of love and compassion, I don't think those voices are the future. And I don't think those voices within our own Christian tradition are the future. The voices that paint God as being willing to just, torture billions of people for all eternity, that's not the future of the Christian faith. And that is a perspective that we will look back on, well, not us, because, in 2,000 years, got bad news. But in a couple thousand years, I think people will look back, and that will be hopefully a minority position, and people will say, how in the world did we ever believe that God was like that? And they're going to look at us and say, gosh, those progressives in 2023 were trying so hard. They were really trying, but gosh, can you believe some of the stuff they thought? And I don't think that's something we are ashamed of now. I think we are moving forward as best we can. You know better, you do better, right? You have better information, you make better decisions, you have better values and beliefs. And I just have this great hope that the evolution of humanity isn't going to be awful. that as a species, we will find ways to bring the goodness forward.
It's going to bend towards love and justice.
It is, yeah. And I think God has always been. To your point, it's never been like, there wasn't like this Friday when God was bored and God went, I think I'm affirming. I wish I'd have found this out before I wrote my book. It would have been really helpful to not put some of that in there. And that's not what happened. God has always been affirming. God has always been nonviolent. God has always believed Black Lives Matter. God has always believed women are just as capable and empowered as men to do whatever they want to do in the world. God has never been homophobic. God has always cared for the poor. And God has been out in front of us going, come on. This thing called human history would be so much prettier if you all would just come on. Yes. Come on. And I think that message is one that's sorely needed especially in the church, who we want to freeze God in particular areas. So you don't read the Bible literally?
No, not most of it, yeah.
That's the first thing that happens. You talk in your book about really how a literal reading, and this has been my experience, when you just come to the Bible and say, it's all literally true, and if it's not all literally true, it's worthless. That's not taking it seriously. And I was taught to take the Bible seriously, but I was also taught that if everything in it wasn't literally true, it was worthless. I don't know how those things actually go together. Can you talk a little bit about your experience, your journey with that, and what you think about engaging the Bible now?
Yeah, so how I came to this was through my own experiential phenomena, the mention of my experience in hell. Something that I recognized in that moment was this is where Jonah was. And I went back and reread the story, and it actually says, Jonah says, out of the belly of hell I cried. Like this story was a myth that was like a container for this transformational process. I understood where I was on the map in this journey, which gave me the faith to see it through, because it was so terrifying and so uncomfortable that if I hadn't had these myths already embedded in me, I would have just had no context for what was happening. And so I realized, like, what happens in a belly? A belly is the place where, like, the old is broken down. It's chewed up, and then it's regenerated and metabolized into this new energy, and then out of the belly is this rebirthing experience. And so this motif of Jonah and being swallowed back into the womb of God, and then we see Jesus referring to this, like, you're going to see the sign of Jonah. Why is he talking about this? And he's naming this pattern where he's swallowed into the belly of the earth. And so I realized that this wasn't like a CNN headline, like Jesus is swallowed into the earth. It's this psychological transformation, and myth kind of gives us a key to these universal energies that are running through us and our location on them, and helps us identify our nature and then bring it into harmony with nature. So we don't, Jesus, in contrast to Jonah, is Jonah really resisted this transformation, and Jesus really surrenders to it. And so it's the inevitable transformation and trajectory of the universe, but we can not make it easier on ourselves, but just have a more surrendered spirit to the inevitable.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time, but there's something I really want you to talk about, because we use the same language for this, and I've heard Stan use it too. This idea that, I'm still in this because I love the Bible. I love Jesus. I really love Jesus. What people will often accuse us of is, well, you progressive Christians are just going back and reading the Bible and making it say what you want. And if it were the case that I went back to the Bible and I found out that they were just right, this is what these stories mean and they're not great, I would be willing to let it go, right? Like, I just would. What I've found is, actually, I haven't read these stories very well. These stories have meaning that still speaks and still resonates, and it shows this trajectory, this invitation to keep it going. And so what I'd say is, Christianity, the Bible, all this is my mother tongue. It's the language I speak. I enjoy, learning other languages, at least being familiar and how to speak a little bit in some other languages. But if I stub my toe, I'm cursing in English, right? Because that's the language I curse in most primarily. I did learn some German in high school and thought I could get by with it with my parents, but they watched Hogan's Heroes, and I did not get by with it. I was grounded for about a week there in 1995. But this idea that this is our language, but there are other languages. And we don't have to be in hostility to other language. Could you just talk a little bit about that as we wrap up?
Yeah. So I love that you use the term mother tongue. That's how I feel about this. And as much like religious trauma and baggage and everything that there was, if I was an English speaker and somehow associated the trauma and abuse with the English language, I don't have to then abandon speaking in English. So I wanted for people to be able to see that the truths that myths are pointing to are true. We don't need the myths for them to be true. They are self-evident, and we can come to these conclusions just like Buddha sitting under a tree, it will reveal itself to us because we're a part of nature and these laws are just at work in us. But the myths are there to point us and take us through into those experiential truths. And so Christianity is this collection of beautiful symbols and stories and myths that lead us into that experience of the eternal. And it's one language. And there are so many other beautiful languages. I minored in Spanish in college, and I so wanted to be fluent in Spanish, and I could never get there. I wanted to have dreams in Spanish, and I could just never quite get there. And I realized how much I loved it. But yes, I'm gonna cuss and have my most intimate conversations in English because it's my mother tongue. And so I wanted for people whose this language is already embedded in you to be able to reclaim it in a beautiful way. And also, if you're I know this language and it's not my preferred tongue, great. You know,
That's okay.
Yeah, there's so many other collections of myths where this truth is going to reveal itself to you. But I hope to take some of the reactionary energy out and give you back some of your language.
Well, you've done a beautiful job. It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing it with us. Heather will be back there at her table selling and signing books in just a moment. So
thank you, guys.
Can we thank Heather? So as Donnie and Daisy come, just I want to let you know what's coming up the next couple of weeks. Next week, I'm going to spend some time talking about Surprise Jesus, but I want to talk about Jesus, and I want to talk about this idea of Jubilee, and I want to talk about justice, and I want to talk about what went wrong that led us to put the word social in front of the word justice, and then debate whether or not it was biblical. Because the entirety of the thing is about justice. So next week we're going to talk about maybe where did this go wrong and how do we put it right again. And then the 25th is Pride Sunday. Yes, I'm going to have my friend, how many of you know Mike Mayashiro? Yeah, Mike is going to be with me. We're going to be talking about his story, and we're going to celebrate communion that day, and it's going to be a really beautiful experience. So thanks for being here, Grace Point. It's beautiful, wonderful to see you. See you soon.
When it rains, it pours, but you didn't even notice. It ain't raining anymore. It's hard to breathe when all you know is the struggle of staying above the rising water line. Well, the sky is finally open. The rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in that same old storm again. You hold tight to your umbrella. Well, darling, I'm just trying to tell you that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. If you could see what I see, you'd be blinded by the colors, yellow, red, and orange and green, and at least a million others. So tie up the boat, take off your coat, and take a look around. Well, the sky is finally opened. The rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in that same old storm again. You hold tight to your umbrella. Well, darling, I'm just trying to tell you that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. Oh, tie up the boat, take off your coat, and take a look around. Everything is alright now, 'cause the sky is finally open. The rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in that same old storm again. Let go of your umbrella, 'cause darling, I'm just trying to tell you that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. Yeah, there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. It'll all be alright.
crazy tingly, everybody. That's so good. Grace Point, thank you so much for being with us today. We love you. You are beautiful. We hope you have a good week. And we've got some chairs to put up, so if you'll help us with that, we'll bring out the things. Thank you. Have a good week. We'll see you next week.